Hi everyone. So this video is about the First Continental Congress, which took place in Philadelphia in 1774, and delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies were sent to Philly to discuss the frustrations that they were having with the taxes passed by the King and Parliament. And they were frustrated by the cultural elements. Also, they wanted to have some of their own decision making, and they were unable to do so. And so the First Continental Congress was one of the first meetings of people who became what the men we call the Founding Fathers. And they had a lengthy meeting, several weeks, and drafted up a list of 4 demands that they would send to the king. So they were going to send this petition to Parliament and to the king in hopes that these would be granted. And so the first was freedom to peaceably assemble. Under the Townshend Acts, the public could not peaceably assemble. You could not gather in groups that were not family size. And there was no political unrest that would prevent this from occurring peacefully. This meant that even things like schools could not meet unless a British soldier were present. Churches, which was a major social outlet for people, could not gather unless a British soldier wanted to be present. Ladies' sewing circles, barn raisings, unless a British soldier were present, people could not do these things. And so that limited people's already very few social interactions to almost none, and it was very frustrating for the public. The purpose of denying peaceable assembly was to prevent revolution from sparking, but dictators always overthrow themselves. They create the situations that lead to their downfall, and this heavy-handed response to this desire to peaceably assemble was something that really helped send many of the colonists over the edge towards supporting revolution a little bit later. So the colonists wanted the right to peacefully assemble. If you are familiar with the Bill of Rights, that is part of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, incidentally. Second, they wanted an end to military occupation. And the military occupation, again, had taken place under the Townshend Acts. And this meant that British soldiers were quartered in private homes and were required to be kept up by the private individuals. And that means that families were having to provide for the British soldiers to a level that they often couldn't afford for themselves, much less for someone else. And so this was a real frustration for the colonists. They wanted an end to military occupation. It was a time of peace, so there was no real necessity for it. Obviously, the purpose of the British here was to quell any talk of revolution, and it would definitely make it hard to, hey, let's plan a revolt, but you got, Edgar the British soldier sitting right there in your living room. And so that was the official or the unofficial purpose for the military occupation. But it really was hard on the public because they had their children going without, so that this British soldier could have so many ounces of lean mutton. Sheep was all about it back in the day, and that was another stick in the fire that was really frustrating for the colonists. They also wanted personal taxation decisions. At the time, the colonists had a single non-voting representative for all 13 colonies. One person was the representative in the British House of Commons, and that person at the time, by the way, was Ben Franklin. But he pointed out that if you don't have a vote, you don't have a voice. If you are not represented by anyone who can actually vote, then you have no authority, you have no political power. And so what the colonists asked for in their demands for the king was a Continental Congress that would be permanent. And so that would be housed physically in the colonies, and the decisions on taxation would be made by these people, these representatives selected from the colonists themselves. And then they would report to the king and Parliament. They were never going to get that, okay? It's like a bargaining tool, If you are going to go buy a car, the guy's not going to offer you a reasonable price. He's going to, make a high price first, and you're going to lowball you. Hopefully you meet in the middle somewhere. And that was the goal. What they wanted ultimately was voting representation in Parliament. That was the end goal. So you shoot for the moon, right? You still get the stars. And then last, they wanted trial by local jury. Under British rule at the time, if you were accused of a crime in the colonies, then you did not stand trial locally. For most crimes, you would have to be deported and stand trial in England, which was then a 6-week journey, and that's just getting there. Then you've got to wait and have your trial and everything like that. And then let's assume you're found innocent. That's going to be hard because if you are all the way across an ocean, you cannot, one, gather evidence in support of your claims, and two, you cannot call witnesses because they're not going to be coming across the ocean to testify in your trial. They can't afford that. So if you were miraculously found innocent, then you would have to go back, and that's another 6 weeks. So you've lost at minimum 3 months of your life, minimum. And so your life really can be destroyed simply by an accusation. Because during that time, an entire season has come and gone. The crops have failed. Your family has had to send out to other places to live because they couldn't manage it by themselves. This was a real thorn in the side of the colonists. And so they wanted trial by local juries. They wanted a system set up similar to our circuit courts that we have today. That was also similar to the British style of governance in the colonies, so the colonists could decide for themselves. So trial by local jury. And this was the fourth of the demands from the Continental Congress. So they packaged them all up nice and neat, shipped them off to the king, and the king disregards it completely. It's 1774. So you know that this is not something that is going to end peacefully. So the king's disregard of these demands from the Continental Congress was the last straw for many colonists. And so the following spring in 1775, the first battle of the American Revolution is fought at Lexington and Concord.